Hey, this is Jonathan, and we're going to talk about bitmap images. Now, bitmap images is the big fundamental technology that you use first in digital media. And there are basically two major technologies you use. You use bitmap, and that's going to be all these images like JPEGs and GIFs and PNGs. And then you have vector, which are then going to be like SVGs and Illustrator files and some other things. Now, what's funny is what we see here on screen is actually not vector. What we see here is what I call raster, and raster is basically the same thing as bitmap. The only difference is that I call a raster when you convert something that is SVG or it's vector, but you have to represent it as a bitmap, and then it becomes rasterized. And so that means to convert something from vector to bitmap mode. So that's something to be aware of for later. Now, what exactly is a bitmap image? All bitmap images are little blocks of color that are mapped to a particular location on a grid. So you can see this one pixel is black and the other ones are white. And so that is what it is, a bit that is mapped to a particular location. So what is resolution? Well, resolution is the number of pixels. I also want you to think about that resolution, especially when it comes to high resolution or low resolution, is the ability to resolve an image. And this is what I mean. If you take a look at this, you can clearly tell that this is the Mona Lisa, and it's because we're looking at this image in a high enough resolution that we can tell what that image is. But if we were up really close and that's all we had, you would not be able to tell that that is the Mona Lisa, because we wouldn't have quite enough information to be able to resolve that image. So resolution is really also about whether or not you can have enough information there to have a good, clean image that's appropriate for its use. So another way to look at resolution is the way it's calculated in Photoshop. If we take a look at this, let's assume that this is 1 inch, even though it's much greater than 1 inch on screen here. This is going to be 1 inch by 1 inch at 3 pixels per inch. That means it's going to be 3 pixels across and 3 pixels down. That's a total of 9 pixels. So resolution is the height and width times whatever the pixels per inch of whatever unit that we're using. This could be 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter, and we could have 3 pixels per centimeter. So moving on, we can divide that even more and say it's 1 inch by 1 inch at 9 pixels per inch, and now we have 81 pixels. So we went from 9 to 81. We went 9 times bigger pretty quickly. Here you can see that we have the same size image of 1 inch by 1 inch, but now it's 28 pixels per inch. So it means that we have 784 pixels. That's a lot more pixels than what we started with. Now, another way to think about this image resolution is pixel dimensions versus width and height at pixels per inch. So pixel dimensions is really just the number of pixels wide and the number of pixels tall, whereas this is, it's 5 inches by 5 inches at 300 pixels per inch or at 100 pixels per inch. But then you have to kind of calculate what that is. So it's a lot easier to just pay attention to the pixel dimensions and think of that as resolution. If you have a larger width and a larger height, then you have a higher resolution image. So take a look at this. Here's a good example. If we have a 1 inch and 1 inch that's only 1 pixel per inch, you can see that it is it's the same size as the one next to it, which is the same size as the ones next to it as well. But you can see that this one, because it's cramming 24 pixels into that same inch, it's a much higher resolution. Now the problem is this: in print we tend to see things as a size. If I tell something in print to be 1 inch by 1 inch, then it ignores the pixels per inch, but then it prints however many pixels we have in that setting. But if I look at it on screen, I might say 1 pixel is actually going to scale down to this tiny little thing, whereas the 24 pixels per inch is going to give me a larger image. Now, truth be told, that's almost the size of 24 pixels for real. So you can see that when it comes to screen versus paper, that pixel per inch setting really does matter quite a lot. So it's much better to just think once again in pixel dimensions. So it used to be that Photoshop would give us an image dialog box that would look like this. We had clearly separated pixel dimensions from our document size, and the document size is whatever width and height, whether it's in inches or centimeters, times our resolution. Going back again, whereas this is just easy. Width is 565 pixels by 600 pixels. In the new version of Photoshop, we have this kind of put into one dialog box, and so you can see that the dimensions are up here where it says 1000 by 667 pixels, and then we have our width and our height and our resolution here. So we're actually going to open up an image at this point and just see what we can do to complete a little bit of an exercise. So I'm going to go to Google and I'm going to find any image. I'm going to look for squirrels, just because I had a run-in with a squirrel earlier today. And so I'm going to go to Google Images and I'm going to look for some squirrels here. Now, one thing that you can do to find a little bit higher quality or higher resolution image is go to Settings, Tools, there we go. Go to Size, and I'm going to go to Large. This way I know that I'm getting a fairly high resolution image. Now, as soon as you find an image that you think is kind of fun, I think this guy is awesome. I'm going to use him. You can see that his pixel dimensions are here. 2658 by almost 1500 pixels. So he's fairly high resolution. Well, I'm going to take that image and right click on it and choose Copy Image. Now I want to go to Photoshop, create a new document, and it should have a clipboard that gives me the same size image. If your image clipboard is not the same size that you saw, then you probably want to find a different image because you might be only getting a thumbnail instead of the full image. So I'm going to hit Create, and then I'm going to do Edit, Paste, Control V. Now I can immediately take this background image and get rid of it. I don't need it right now, and in fact I really don't even need this layer, so I can go over to the right and then flatten this. So I'm going to flatten the image, and by flattening the image it just gets rid of any layers that I might have. Now I want to crop this image just a little bit and resize it a little bit as well. So I'm going to go up to the Image dialog box and find Image Size. Now I know what size I want to make this image in the end. I want it to be 900 pixels by 600 pixels, so 900 pixels wide by 600 pixels tall. Hopefully you found an image that's also horizontal. So I'm going to say, let's see if I make this, I'm going to use the resample. I'm going to have that on, and I'm going to change this to pixels because it's a lot easier to think in pixels than in inches. And I want this to be 900 pixels, and it looks like that's going to be less than 600, so I'm going to change that to 600 pixels instead. Notice that it's changed my width to be larger number than the 900, but I'll cut those off. Now notice this resolution setting. That really doesn't matter except for the fact that you do want to change the resolution first before you change your pixel dimensions. So if I change this to 100 pixels per inch, then I have to go back to the height and change that to 600, and you'll see I'm back to the same numbers that I had before, 10,067 by 600. I can also change that to 300 pixels per inch and then go back and change that to 600 again, and you'll see that I'm back to the exact same numbers. If I change this over to inches, then it will show me that that's only going to be 3.5 inches by 2 inches at 300 pixels per inch is going to equal dimensions of 1067 by 600. Now if I go and change that to 100, Notice that if I change it to 100 and I keep the inches the same, it now has changed my dimensions to be much smaller. So that's why you kind of have to go back to inches to pixels, then change your numbers because you know you want 600 as your height, and then you're back to that 1067. So it is a little tricky. You always have to remember, if you do want to mess with the resolution settings, you do have to change that first, and then you have to go back to your pixel dimensions. But pretty much I want you to really pay attention to pixel dimensions and much less the inches or size, width and height. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and this has now made a smaller image. Now I can zoom up just a little bit. I'm going to do that with the Alt key, or you can also do Control 0 to make it fit to your screen. Now I know that I want to crop this image to just the 900 pixels wide. So instead of doing that in the image size dialog, which you don't need to do this right now, I'm going to do it. I'm going to just change this to my 900. What happens is that if I don't resample this, because I want to keep sure that I keep that exact same dimensions. Oh, see, I really messed it all up now. In fact, I'm not even really sure how it's going to work. So I'm going to take that off. I'm going to just cancel, because that's being a pain. Image size. So I do have to resample, of course. I'm gonna resample. What I need to do is turn that off so it's not locked. So I'm going to change that to 9 inches by 6 inches at 100 pixels per inch, and I've unlocked the height and the width, and now I click OK, and now what you've seen is that it's squeezed in my image, and that's not a good thing. You definitely never want to squish an image unless it's like a texture that nobody could tell that you ever did stretch. So I'm going to undo that, File, Edit, Undo Image Size, and instead I'm going to go to the Canvas Size dialog. The Canvas Size dialog allows me to crop this image, and now I can change it to exactly 900 pixels per inch, and then I can choose whether or not I want to crop it in the center or over on the right hand side, which is where I think I want it to go from. So I'm going to go ahead and cut some of the clipping means that you will lose some of this image, and I'm going to proceed, and you'll now see that I have created an image. If I go back to the image size dialog box, you'll see it's 9 inches by 6 inches at 100 pixels per inch, otherwise known as 900 pixels by 600 pixels. Now let's lock that back together, and I'm going to click off the resample so it doesn't change. Now, if I wanted to see what the resolution of this thing would be, or what the size of this would be if it was 300 pixels per inch, notice it's now 3 inches by 2 inches, but the dimensions have never changed. I could even make that 3000 pixels per inch, and it's now 0.3 by 0.2 inches, or just maybe 1 pixel per inch, and it's now 900 inches by 600 inches. But the pixel dimensions of the file have never changed. And online, when it comes to websites don't pay any attention to the width and height and the resolution of the image. They only pay attention to the pixel dimensions. So that's why typically you're not going to really worry about the resolution until we get into compositing images, and then you'll see why. So I'm going to go ahead and make this 100 pixels per inch for right now. It's at 9 inches by 6 inches. I click OK, and I'm going to go ahead and save this file. So I'm going to do Save As, and this is going to be my this is Image Resolution, I think is the name of it. And it's just going to be saving out a PNG. And that's all you need to save out and submit in that part of the assignment. Now we're going to go on. The reason why is because I have just one more thing. So just looking at that image dialog box, I had 9 inches by 6 inches at 100 dpi, I had 0.9 by 0.6 at 1000 dpi, 900 inches by 600 inches at 1 dpi. So the question is, which one is a higher resolution file? And you probably guessed it by now. They're all exactly the same. All we really care about is that it's 900 pixels by 600 pixels. Try and ignore the dots per inch or the pixels per inch because it's really not that important until we get to putting multiple images into one Photoshop comp. And then it's important that they're at the same PPI settings or DPI settings because they all come in relative to that setting, which we'll talk about at a later time. So go ahead and save your work and upload that one file and go on to the next tutorial. Thanks.